So how do we convert the algorithm to do something, to execute a set of steps, let's say 5 times, into Python code that lets you do that, right? How do you do that? And in order to do that, in order to convert the algorithm to a Python code, what you need is the while keyword, okay? It's a Python reserved keyword, okay? And what it does is it checks some value, okay? It checks some value. It needs a counter variable essentially, but what it does is the general form is while some condition is true, some condition is true, do this, execute these statements, okay? So in this case, the condition that we want while to check is whether or not the counter, the number of times the program has already executed, is less than or equal to 5 or not, okay? So what we would do is we set the initial value of counter variable, okay? So we'll say counter, it's a variable, counter equals 1, okay? Now what we would do is we check if the counter is less than or equal to 5 or not, okay? We'll say while counter less than or equal to 5, we execute a statement or a block of statements. So we will say uh, a equals int input, right? And then the next line, total equals total plus a. And then we'll update counter. We'll say counter equals counter plus 1. Okay. So in the algorithm, we just said do this 5 times. Okay. But as it turns out, Python has to keep track of how many times the set of statements has already been executed so that it knows when to stop. Okay. And that's how we do it. We have a variable called counter. Okay. Or you can just name it anything you like. Okay. You can just say n equals 1. Doesn't matter. Okay. One of the common variable names for counters is I. People often do I equals 1. Okay. Now, set the initial value of counter to 1. Okay. And then while counter is less than or equal to 5, you execute the set of statements. And every time you do that, you increment the counter value to 1. So initially counter was 1, right? You check this statement, you check the while loop right here. It says, is counter less than 1? Is counter less than 5? Yes, it is. Then you do this, right? You execute the following set of statements, which is a equals input and total equals total plus a. And then what you do is you increment the counter. So the counter now is 2. Okay. And from here, the statement, it goes back, okay? It goes back here and it checks again. And it says, is counter less than or equal to 5? Yes, it is, because counter is 2. It is. Then you go back again, you execute the statement, you update the counter, counter equals counter plus 1, and the counter previous value was 2, right? So now it's 3. Again, go back. Is counter less than 5, less than or equal to 5? Yes, it is. Counter is 3. You execute the statements here again, increment the counter again, right? So the counter is now 4. You go back, you do this again and again, okay? So you do this part again and again until this condition is not satisfied anymore, okay? And the condition is counter less than or equal to 5, okay? Once counter becomes 6, this program stops executing, okay? At least this, I'm sorry, this block of code right here stops executing, okay? So let me clear this again. So it's like an if statement, okay? It's like somewhat like an if statement. So we have this counter comparison operator. So it could be less than equal to, greater than equal to, or equal to, two equal tos, right? Or even not equal to, even this is, right? And then you have some value, right? The value would dictate how many times the block of statements would be executed, right? Just note that this colon is, again, just like if statements, this is mandatory. Also, there is a space, there is a tab, right? This is mandatory as well. So anything after the while that is tabbed would be executed in the while block, okay? This part is called a while block, okay? While block. Anything that is preceded by a tab will be executed inside the while block. And the way it works is you check this condition right here, and if this condition is satisfied, you execute the statement, and then you go back, and then you do the thing over and over again. So you execute step, this is let's say step 2, right? And then step 3, and then step 4, and then you go back to step 2 again, and this goes on until the decision at 2, right, fails. Okay? So if you had to sort of draw the flow of this code, it would be something like this. Okay? So let's say this is step 1, this is step 2, this is step 3, and this is step 4. Okay? And maybe at the end there is a step 5 in which we display, right, display result. Okay? It's not mandatory, but it's common. Okay? So how will the flow of this code look like? Something like this. You'll have step 1, and then at step 2 you make a decision, and the decision is whether or not I want to go to step 3 and 4 or not. Okay? So if counter is less than some values, which is 5, if counter is less than 5, then you execute steps 3 and then step 4, and then come back. Okay? Come back to step 2. That's why it's called a loop. That is why it is called a loop, right? There is a loop in there, right? Else, if it's not true, you go to step 5. Okay?